We have a huge update of news tonight in the NHL, including the latest trade rumors on teams like the Vancouver Canucks, who's going to be clearing some cap space, the Edmonton Oilers possibly looking for a goalie. We have some mock trades to discuss on Stars defenseman John Klingberg, plus Evander Kane's finally officially heading to Edmonton. Could the Coyotes end up playing in a 5,000-seat arena for 3 to 4 years? All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today. First, before we get into some of the bigger items, a couple of quick items here. One on the NHL waiver wire. Sami Niku of the Montreal Canadiens and Brett Connolly of the Blackhawks were on waivers yesterday. They both cleared, so no claims and no new players on waivers today. We have a couple of signings as well. The Penguins have extended Jeff Carter on a 2-year extension at $3.125 million, and that includes a full no-move clause for Carter, who's been a terrific fit since coming over in a trade from the LA Kings. So that's a pretty good signing. Obviously, Carter's getting into his later 30s, but still pretty productive. And if the Penguins continue to sign Malkin, Letang, and keep those guys around, they can still have Crosby, Malkin, Carter down the middle. Still a pretty solid center depth there in Pittsburgh. So it's a pretty good signing, pretty good value for what Jeff Carter is going to bring you as well. And the Ottawa Senators have extended defenseman Nick Holden on a 1-year contract at $1.3 million. And he gets a modified no trade where he has a 10-team list that he can veto a trade to. Again, another good value signing there for Ottawa. Holden has been one of the better vets, a good acquisition from last offseason. He's been a solid, third pair veteran guy, good in the room, good with the young guys, and certainly worth keeping around to help mold some of these younger defensemen as they continue to develop. So, unfortunately, a signing like Michael Del Zotto has worked out terribly, but the Holden acquisition certainly has gone relatively well. He's been pretty steady in the lineup on a pretty consistent basis. The East Coast League have officially suspended Jacob Panetta for the rest of the season. He was the player accused in a racial incident against Jordan Subban that we discussed a few days ago. The team that he was with had already released him, so he's no longer employed by that team, but he will be able to apply for reinstatement at the end of the season, which I believe is in March, and at that point he could attempt to get re-signed and continue playing for it next year if a team wants to give him a chance. And the other news here as well today that was pretty significant is Evander Kane has been officially cleared by the NHL. He will not be facing any additional supplemental discipline or suspension for the COVID protocol violations that he was being accused of. I'm not sure how this is going to work in his case against the Sharks, who obviously put him through unconditional waivers to terminate his contract, and he is appealing that with the help of the NHL Players Association. Is likely going to end up in arbitration, and the NHL at this point has cleared him of any additional suspension. So the COVID protocol violations they were talking about, I'm not sure they can be substantiated, at least according to the NHL. So you have to wonder how that's going to work out. But nonetheless, for now, he's able to finally sign a contract, and he's agreed to terms with the Edmonton Oilers, who we've talked about has been the front runners the entire time. The Florida Panthers and the Washington Capitals had pretty in-depth conversations, but never got to the point where a contract offer was made. So Kane will sign with the Oilers. He's expected that he might even be able to play as quickly as this coming weekend. Evander Kane, and part of that is going to be a signing bonus, and part of it will be salary for the rest of the year. He's going to end up making just over $1 million for the rest of the year, so his cap hit is actually $2.1 million. So you'd have to think, even though the word is that other teams had serious conversations but never made offers, somebody had to end up bidding that up, you would think, right? I mean, a player who just got bought out of their contract through unconditional waivers, the Oilers, not to say that he might not be worth it when it comes to his on-ice production. I hope for their sake that he puts up the goals and points and makes it worth it from that point of view, and I hope he keeps his off-ice stuff in check so that he's not an issue for them, because that's been the story of his career. But still, you'd have to think that they could have been able to get him cheaper. At least you would think. So I'm not sure what Holland's up to. The other part about this is, to me, this is really going to hamper the possibility of getting a goaltender who they desperately need. They got a couple good games out of Mikko Koskinen recently, but as I've talked about before, the big issue with Koskinen is consistency, and the bigger the workload, the more he falters. He can be good in small stretches from time to time, and he can be an okay backup, but that's about, to me, the extent of where he's productive. And I don't know, they need something more than that, and Mike Smith has been hurt. No clear-cut answer when he's coming back. They really needed to go shopping for a goalie, but I understand the need for a scoring winger. They get him for cheap, but I think they could have got a better deal here. But hopefully the Kane situation works out. And as I said, the whole situation against the Sharks and obviously fighting back against a contract buyout will be something that we follow here in the weeks to come as well. No really clear-cut timelines on when we're going to know more information around that. Now, we also got some pretty interesting news today from the Coyotes and Coyotes beat reporter Craig Morgan. He put out a lengthy article today discussing the fact that the Coyotes apparently are in the advanced stages of arrangements being made and negotiations to possibly use ASU's new multipurpose arena for 3 to 4 years. Now, the seating capacity there is only about 5,000. Now, there's also word from Elliot Friedman. He's heard from some of his sources that with the NHL, if the NHL approves this, they would likely have to make some NHL upgrades to make it everything that they need in there. And it could even further reduce the capacity down to like 3,000 to 4,000, somewhere around 3,500. Like, that is pretty minuscule. Now, the other thing that comes along with this is if they end up doing this, the arrangement here is a couple of things that are going to be challenging. For one, they won't be able to use ASU's, like their dressing rooms and all that kind of stuff. They're going to have to build their own extension on, which I believe they said is going to estimate between $15 and $20 million to be able to have all of their stuff in place to be able to, their dressing room and all the stuff that they need to prepare for games, because they're not able to use the other ones. Secondly, of course, ASU's already got their hockey schedule done up for next year, and they book a lot of their games on Friday and Saturday nights. So obviously a lot of the prime times are not going to be available. They're going to have no choice but to work around their schedule. It is their arena. So it's really going to be rather interesting to see if this moves ahead. Now, normally the NHL would never allow this on a regular, permanent basis, but Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley did say that because it would only be temporary, that he wouldn't rule it out. But temporary is 3 to 4 years is a long time. Now, it's already been reported that the negotiations on the previous project in the Tempe area to get that new arena was not going well. And really, you would think that this kind of further cements the fact that that's probably not going to happen. And they're probably going to end up back at square one here, not really knowing where they can go, which means they're going to need more time to get another project up and going. The cost as well for the additions to be put on an ASU that they would need to do to make it so they could use it, the $15 and $20 million, would have to be covered completely by Coyotes ownership. That would have to come right out of Alex Marullo's pocket. So, considering how they've struggled paying bills, I know I've said it before, a lot of people are convinced the guy is extremely wealthy, but I'm not saying he isn't. It just seems awfully weird if he's really that rich, why he couldn't pay his bills, right? Hopefully everybody understands why the question marks remain. This just seems like a really odd scenario, but it's hard to imagine the NHL could allow this to work. My only rebuttal is, think back to when Quebec City and the Winnipeg Jets, when they had their teams and they were deemed to be in trouble, and when they both were ended up relocating to the United States, if they had a situation like that and they ended up in a little tiny arena with 3,000 to 5,000 people, would Gary Bettman have ever allowed that? I can't imagine. He'd be like, nope, you're out of here. You're going to the United States in a heartbeat. The amount of effort he's made to keep them there is ridiculous. Obviously, if they can get into ASU's facility, they're hoping to be able to build a relationship with the in the Tempe area, which will help them get their arena. If they can figure it out long term, I don't know, man. It still seems like a bit of a pipe dream to get this settled, and it's just hard to imagine that they're going to end up playing in such a tiny arena. Now, there's also the Coliseum, which is in the Memorial Coliseum as well down there they could be able to play in, which is not, I don't think it's an option really, but that's seated like 10,000. I don't know, like it's such a tiny spot. It's mind-blowing that they're going to end up doing this probably. It seems like it's, like I said, it's in advanced stages, and many feel like it's pretty close to being a done deal. Something they could have officially announced here not too distant future, so that the NHL can factor all this in, because they have to get their dates lined up so the schedule makers can work on next year and all that. Like, it's a big project, big amount of time. So we'll see where this goes, but it's certainly an interesting development. So yes, I guess theoretically they stay, but there's still no long-term permanent solution in place. And you have to really wonder for sure if the NHL will indeed approve this project. Now, as I mentioned, we also have some trade talk around the Canucks, Oilers, and John Klingberg of the Dallas Stars. Let's start with the Vancouver Canucks. We did get a further idea on what their plans will be heading into the NHL trade deadline from Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin after they introduced Allvin as GM and had their media availability here yesterday. Rutherford made it known that one of the things they want to do is create some cap space and cap flexibility. Well, the only way to do that, of course, would be to shed some salary and not take as much coming back. Have more going out than in. Now, of course, JT Miller has gotten a ton of attention in the rumor mill as of late, and as I've said, I'm not completely convinced that they're going to make a deal there. Obviously, if the team comes calling with a big enough offer, they really may not have a choice but to seriously consider it. I know Pierre LeBrun tonight on TSN Insider Trading made it known that it might take as much as 3 or 4 assets to convince Vancouver to pull the trigger, and if a team comes calling with that much, I would suggest they might have to, as much as it might not have been something that they were planning for. But of all the teams that we've talked about with Miller, apparently the Bruins are heavily interested as well. Again, the price tag would be really high, though. It's debatable if he even moves anywhere. But when you hear the president and GM say they want to create cap space, it would be something along those lines that would have to have happen. But as Dave Pagnotta, the fourthperiod.com, brings up, another target of theirs to move out to create that same space might be defenseman Tyler Myers, who's making $6 million and has 2 more years after the current season. I'm not sure how easily that contract could be moved. I'm assuming it would be relatively difficult. They might have to retain some salary, figure something out. I'm not sure what exactly they would do in that regard, but Myers is certainly another name outside of Miller that very well could be moved at the deadline. Now, of course, the blue line, I'm not sure what they would do back there to replace the minutes Myers logs, but they'd have to figure something out. And of course, this is all as well contingent on the fact that they're, maybe not going to be a playoff team, right? If they are trending towards getting into the playoffs, I would imagine their strategy will be a little different, but or will it? Or will Rutherford take the exact same approach, not really thinking of the team as a cup contender per se? So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but we'll see if Tyler Myers ends up being a name that they do indeed try to move out to create that much needed cap flexibility heading into the offseason. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, with Evander Kane signing at Edmonton, that does limit their ability to get a goaltender. They're pretty much going to have money going out as money coming in. And we've talked in recent days about some goalies that they've reportedly had interest in. And another one that's been mentioned by Elliot Friedman is Semyon Varlamov of the New York Islanders. Now, of course, the Islanders are having a down season, but certainly have played better as of late. And even though they do have a lot of games in hand, getting themselves back into a playoff picture might be pretty challenging, but at this point, I wouldn't completely rule it out. It's still being rumored that Lou Lamoriello's been working on some potential trades as well, so you really can't rule out the Islanders right now. But as we get closer to the deadline, since we're still about 8 weeks out, it is possible they could consider trading goaltender Semyon Varlamov if indeed, especially it looks like they're going to be out of the playoffs. I mean, he was mainly brought in to be a mentor to Ilya Sorokin. Sorokin has been a phenomenal young goaltender for them, well established now, certainly capable of taking on more of the playing time, and certainly would free up a lot of cap space and much needed flexibility for the Islanders if they were able to shed Varlamov's salary. He makes $5 million and he's still under contract for next year as well, which would be problematic for the Oilers possibly too. I mean, for right now, for this year, Koskinen's making 4.5. So if they swap Koskinen and maybe something else for Varlamov, they could make the money work, because obviously the Islanders would be sending the better goalie here. So I'm not sure what the additional piece along with Koskinen would go to the Islanders if a deal was pulled off. It might have to be one of their younger players that the Islanders would have interest in. I don't know if it'd be like a guy like Yamamoto or maybe Tyler Benson. Hard to say who it would be exactly, but you throw in a contract plus Koskinen, the money would even out. They could theoretically make it work, but then next year would be problematic, and Ken Holland would be forced to make moves in the offseason just to become cap compliant, especially with a few other contracts that are going to be big that they need to look after in the offseason as well. It could get tricky, and if they end up in the offseason in a situation of weakness when it comes to their cap and forced to make trades, it's going to be that much harder, and teams are going to be trying to extort that much more out of them to make it happen. But we'll see what happens here. The Oilers, like I said, they might have the handcuffs on now, but Varlamov has been mentioned as a potential other goalie target for Edmonton as well. Now, when it comes to Klingberg, one of the bigger defensive names on the market, the Stars were reportedly very ambitious to get a deal done, as reported by Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman here in the past week or two. They're certainly very motivated to get this done. The teams that are reportedly in the mix right now include the Boston Bruins, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Florida Panthers, as well as the Toronto Maple Leafs. And according to a recent article here in The Athletic, they go over some potential mock trades for Klingberg. So I want this to give to you what they're thinking for these deals, what it's going to take to land the top defenseman, and see what you all think. Obviously, we know Klingberg's having a down season. His numbers have not been great ever since Rick Bowness took over as head coach of the Bruins, and I really think a fresh start somewhere else would do a world of good for him. But let's see here. For the Boston Bruins, they had the package to acquire Klingberg being a first-round pick and Jake DeBrusk. I mean, that's a pretty steep price. The Bruins, I don't know about that. I mean, if they feel like they're serious cup contenders, then perhaps it's worth it. We know DeBrusk wants a trade anyway, and a high pick is likely going to have to be involved in this kind of defenseman. When it comes to the Hurricanes, they had down 3 younger players, including Jesper Fast, Ryan Suzuki, Ville Koivunen. So certainly 3 younger players that might be of interest for the Dallas Stars. No first-round picks in there. Maybe something has to be adjusted. I'm not sure that gets it done, but it's certainly an intriguing package for the Stars to think about. When it comes to the Florida Panthers, they suggested a first-round pick in Owen Tippett. I think that would pique the interest of the Stars. They get a pretty solid forward prospect who has the potential to be a decent goal scorer and a first-rounder. For the Maple Leafs, again, we don't have them trading any first-round picks because it's been reported the Leafs are probably less likely to move out a lot of draft currency when it comes to making deadline deals this year. But it includes Justin Hall going out for the purpose of having some money to level out for the cap. Youngster Nick Robertson, of course, whose brother Jason plays for the Dallas Stars, would be a family reunion there, so I'm sure that would be well received. And then, of course, Ronnie Hervonen as well. So a real solid Finnish prospect. So that's 2 good prospects from the Leafs and a veteran guy for the money aspect of it, and Justin Hall. And I don't think there's really a lot of advantage to getting Hall. He's also doesn't have a lot of term or money left on his deal, but it's a pretty good prospect package from the Leafs there. So I think they all stand a pretty decent chance of getting the trade done. But that's what the Athletic writers that cover the Stars here feel like it's going to take to get a Klingberg trade in place. It's certainly not going to be cheap, not going to be something that teams take lightly here. And obviously, if they feel like they're a legitimate cup contender, I would think that they make that kind of trade. So Carolina, Toronto, Florida, I'm not so sure Boston pulls the trigger on that. I do see a fit there, but at the same time, I think they'd be better off maybe to address maybe the left side of their blue line instead of the right side. I'm not sure he's as big of a fit there as maybe a guy like Chychrun or something, which is still going to be quite expensive for them to pull off as well, even more expensive where he has term. But I would think the other teams here between the Canes, Panthers, and Leafs would all have a decent chance at those packages. But it just goes to show you that it's not going to be cheap for some of these top defensemen that are on the rental market going into this year's NHL trade deadline. So which of those do you think is the best offer for Dallas in Klingberg? Let me know down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.